All righty. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight to our Bond Town Hall. This meeting, just so you know, is being recorded, number one, and also folks are Zooming in. So those who weren't able to be here tonight, they're able to watch, excuse me, they're able to watch on Zoom, and they will have the opportunity to ask questions. So we're going to try to include as many people as we can tonight. I'd like, again, thank you for coming out to learn more about what is being proposed for the future of Farmers Branch. We have some very exciting projects and important plans to discuss regarding our city, and our council members and myself. We truly want your feedback. So after we've gone through the presentation, if you have questions, please ask them once we have finished the presentation. Then, if you notice, we have some boards around the room, and the boards speak to each of the proposed bond items. We'll be able to break out, and if you want to learn more about a specific item, you can go to that station. We'll have council folks throughout the room, as well as city staff, to be able to tell everybody in more detail about specific programs. But as we get through the program, at the end, then I'm going to open up the floor for questions. I'm going to invite anybody who has a question to please come up to the microphone. Just state your name. You don't have to say your address, but do state your name and then ask your question, and we will try to get as many questions answered as thoroughly as we can. And Zoom viewers will also be able to ask their questions. Jeff Brady will be monitoring that. All right. So moving forward, you know, it's really important that we recognize that on events or proposed expenditures, such as what we're going to talk about tonight, that your voice is heard. This is your money, our money, and so it's very important that we hear from you, and very important that we communicate details. We are here to give information tonight. I'm not telling anybody to vote for or against anything. We're here to communicate information about what is being discussed, so you as individuals can make an informed decision moving forward. So why is council considering a May 2024 bond? We have needs in the city, and before we spend money, we need to know that our residents are on board and in tune with the things that need attention in our city. So it's important to note that our city is a very low debt city. We only have about 3% debt, and generally speaking, anything below 10% is considered very good. So we don't want to just spend money because we can. We want to spend money wisely, prudently, on things that are needed, and do it when and where it makes sense. It's important to know that any proposed bond, and I want to make sure that I'm very clear on this, any proposed bond, whether it be from a city, or school district, or some other municipal entity, government entity, is a tax increase. You need to know that. The law requires that. It is a tax increase. Now, what we are talking about this evening, because we have $13 million worth of debt that is maturing and will be rolling off the books, so to speak, we're looking to possibly replace that debt with new debt, thus creating a net zero tax rate increase situation for residents. okay? We'll talk more about that in a minute. So what is going to be discussed tonight is going to be broken down into two parts. $8 million of general obligation proposed debt, and then $5 million of certificate of obligation debt. And I'm going to talk about what both of those are. So forgive me if I'm oversimplistic, but I think it bears being said. What is a certificate of obligation? It's a debt instrument, a type of bond that does not require voter approval. It only requires council approval. And it's typically, those types of debt are typically used to fund things necessary for public welfare, public safety, and sometimes certain emergencies. Compared to general obligation bonds, which are also a debt instrument. However, they require approval of the taxpayers. So we can't just say we're going to spend money. It's got to, those items that are under a general obligation category have to be approved by the taxpayers. Okay. Those funds are typically used to obviously benefit the city and maybe, parks, public buildings. Sometimes streets fall into that category, but they are the non-essential public items if you separate those from, say, police and fire. Okay? So what would be included in the new debt? Well, as I mentioned earlier, about $5 million, not about, for sure, $5 million of it would be certificates of obligation issued to fund a new 911 dispatch center. Now, our plan is to move forward with our partner cities in NTEC, which are Carrollton, Coppell, and Addison. We have a shared emergency call center that handles all 911 calls. And this is definitely critical to public safety and the city being able to provide the top-rated service that we provide. And so this would be paid for with certificates of obligation that would be city council approved. The rest of the debt would be $8 million of general obligation bonds, which would fund 5 separate projects in Farmers Branch. Voters would be able to vote on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. They could vote for all of them. They could vote for certain ones. You could not vote for some. Those are 5 individual projects that the voters, you, would have the opportunity to approve or reject. So I'd like you to keep in mind, though, as you're considering all this, again, remember, we have $13 million worth of debt that's rolling off the books, and the plan would be to just replace that with new items that need attention or are deserving of your consideration. So it would create a net zero tax rate increase situation for us as residents. Keep in mind, again, all 5 projects are approved, no tax rate increase. If all 5 were to be rejected, the average homeowner would see a tax offset of about $19 a year. and I believe the average homeowner being about a $331,000 house, okay? The average senior would have a net tax offset of about $13 a year. So it's not a large sum of money. So what are the projects that are being considered? We have money to continue our demo rebuild program. We have money for the Squire Park renovation. I should say we don't have money. We are proposing, let me just make sure I'm very clear on my language. We are proposing to have money for the demo rebuild program. We're proposing to renovate and add features to Squire Park. We're proposing that the branch connection renovation, which is what we're going to be in the middle of starting next month here, will be able to fulfill phase 2 of that. Phase 1 has already been approved. There's money for trails and sidewalks within that proposed bond, and then there's proposed $2 million expense for water infrastructure improvements. So those are the items. Again, around the room, we'll be able to talk about those projects individually and explain them in more detail. And we will explain them in a little more detail here in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to give you all basic overview of what is being proposed. Now, we're good? Okay. So why are these projects being discussed? They're being proposed and discussed because they align with the critical business outcomes that, or goals, that our 2024 strategic plan has set forth. And this is a culmination of work that the council has put together, and it's also taken into account some of our previous critical business outcomes that were outlined by previous councils, because once a council changes, those business goals don't just die. They live on paper and they live as goals moving forward. Councils may modify them somewhat, but we continue that work because we're not done. So, you know, we want to have and be able to provide access to diverse housing. We want to support the arts. We want to make sure that we're providing top-notch recreation facilities for our residents, and we want to just maintain and build high-quality public assets. So many of, as I mentioned, many of our critical business outcomes were initiated by councils that might go back several years. But there's still items of concern and goals that are relevant today for all of us who live here. These projects, they also align with our comprehensive plan, which includes prioritizing parks and open spaces and pursuing projects to improve pedestrian accessibility throughout the city. So at this point, I'm going to invite our communications director, Jeff Brady, to come up and talk about each of the items in a little more detail, and then I'll come back, finish up, and then we'll have questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, Council. And I just want to say it's great to see this large turnout. We never know exactly how many people will come out to a bond hearing, a meeting like this, but I'm really pleased that we have so much interest. So thank you for participating. And again, we also know that we have quite a few people who are Zooming, who are watching virtually, so we appreciate your participation, and we value those who are watching online, and we will have, as the Mayor mentioned, we'll have an opportunity for anyone here to ask a question using the mic in the center, and then we'll also have an opportunity after that for anyone who is Zooming, who's watching from home, to participate by asking a question as they see fit. And so, and also just to reiterate, the Mayor and the Council and myself and all of the staff here, our job is not to advocate. So we are not advocating in any way how the public should vote. We're simply explaining that if these projects were to be approved, how the money would be spent. And what our subject matter experts here, we've got our department heads here who can answer all of the granular detail about each of these projects. And so my job here for the next couple of minutes is just to kind of give a broad overview. So we'll do that, and then we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll have questions from our Zoom audience. And then, as the mayor mentioned, after that, we'll be here as long as you need for more granular or more detailed questions about each specific project, and we have these large boards around the perimeter of the room which speak to each of the projects. So without any further ado, Proposition A would be to continue the existing demo rebuild program, which many of you may already be familiar with. You may have heard about it. It's been in Farmers Branch since 2009. And in that length of time, the demo rebuild program has already handled 127 different projects. So what it would do, the demo rebuild program basically provides financial incentives for residents and builders to demolish and build new homes to increase the property value of properties, basically land and residential properties in Farmers Branch. And that would generate new tax revenue, which then is contributed back to the city of Farmers Branch for infrastructure and for other purposes. So that's kind of a summary there, and that's an example of what the houses look like, just one of many examples of the before and after, the transformation that we see on these lots in different neighborhoods here in Farmers Branch. And so this would be a bond proposal of $500,000, $500,000, and the tax offset would be $1.16 per year for the average homeowner. So what that means is, you may say, well, what's the tax offset? What does that mean, Jeff? Well, the tax offset is basically, if this bond proposal were not to pass, the average homeowner would have a reduction in their overall annual tax bill of about $1.16. And the average senior homeowner would have an annual reduction of 78 cents. Okay? So that's Proposition A. There's 5. We'll go through all of them. And then again, we have our subject matter experts here who can answer detailed questions, and I'm sure the council may want to weigh in too on some of their observations as they put these proposals together. Proposition B is our Squire Park improvements, and some of you may be familiar with Squire Park. The improvements here, there's an artist rendition, an artist rendering of what the improvements might look like. And this would include a flow-through freshwater splash pad with multiple play features, a new sports court, adequate parking, new landscaping, a pavilion, and park and security lighting at Squire Park. So the bond amount for this proposition would be $1.5 million, and the tax offset for this project would be $3.48, or about $3.50 per year. Again, that's per year for the average homeowner, and $2.34 for the average senior homeowner. And we can explain if you have questions about, well, what is the average homeowner? What does that mean? What's the average home? We've got experts here. We've got plenty of people who can address those specifics. But as the mayor said, the average home is calculated at about $380,000, and this includes the homestead exemption also. So that's basically how our calculations were developed here. All right? So Proposition C. This is involving the building we're in right now. Proposition C, the Branch Connection renovation Phase 2. So obviously there's already a renovation underway here at the Branch Connection. That's why it's closed. But what is being proposed in this proposition, this project, would be Phase 2. And Phase 2 of the renovation would involve a new vestibule or main entrance, new offices, new yoga and stretch room, a new ballroom. It would renovate the room we're in. It would renovate the kitchen and provide new bathrooms. Now, the bond amount for this project is $2 million, and the tax offset is $4.64 per year for the average homeowner, and $3.12 for the average senior homeowner. So that's Proposition C. Proposition D, trails and sidewalks. So this project would provide improvements that would upgrade the active transportation, that is pedestrian and cyclist pathways, all across the city. So there's no one area that's being targeted, but it would address areas that have the greatest deficit of trails and sidewalks. And it would also construct additional trails and sidewalks, not just repair old ones, but construct additional trails and sidewalks to connect with existing trails and sidewalks to create more of that pedestrian and cyclist-friendly community. And the bond amount here is $2 million. And again, the tax offset is $4.64 for the average homeowner, $3.12 for the average senior homeowner. And then the last bond project or bond proposal that will potentially be on the May ballots, Proposition E, water infrastructure improvements. Now, you may have heard about the need. This is not unique to Farmers Branch. It's certainly nationwide. We have aging infrastructure that has to be replaced. And $2 million is merely a small step in the right direction. The need in Farmers Branch is much larger, and would cost a lot more. But at least this is an effort in that direction. But the upgrades, the improvements would upgrade the city's aging water, utility infrastructure, remove aging water lines, install brand new PVC lines to provide sustainable, reliable, and high-quality water utilities. And this, again, the bond amount for this one is $2 million. And so you've seen these numbers before, $4.64 for the average homeowner and $3.12 for the average senior homeowner here in Farmers Branch. So that, again, that's a very brief summary of the 5 projects. And what we want to go over next is just the bond election timeline. So this is what you can expect in the coming months, what this conversation will look like here in Farmers Branch. First, the council, if the council sees fit, the council would call for a special election. So to be clear, that hasn't been done yet. This is not a decided thing. The council has not voted to call the special election, but there's a window of time when they would have to do that between January 22nd to February 16th. A special election would have to be called in that window. And then the idea would be to have more town halls, not just this one, but maybe smaller town halls, maybe divided up by district across the city between February and April. So February, March, and April, maybe some additional town halls, most likely to include a Zoom audience if that is what the council decides. But again, to explain these projects in greater detail for people who were not able to make it tonight. And then after that, of course, we'd have early voting. Every election involves early voting. There would be about 8 days of early voting this spring between Monday, April 22nd and Tuesday, April 30th. The special election would begin, of course, with that window for people who like to take advantage of early voting. And then, of course, Election Day would be in May, Saturday, May 4th. And again, as the mayor specified, each separate project would be on the May ballot individually. So voters would have the option to approve or not approve one, none, several, or all of these projects, each voter. And then, of course, as with any election, we'd have to canvass the votes. That would be between May 7th and 15th. The election results always have to be canvassed. And then if one or all of the projects are approved by voters, on July 9th, the City Council would be able to pass an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the bonds. So that's just a very brief calendar of what would happen after this, depending on what voters decide. And then the next steps, so we've touched on this already, but there would be several town halls, possibly one each month, March, April, May. Those dates and specific locations have not yet been determined. And then there'd be an online outreach, of course. We would oversee trying to push out as much information as possible about what these projects would entail. And so that would be our newsletters, our websites. We would very likely have a Polco survey to get more feedback from the public. That's an online survey. And, of course, using social media. And then, as I've already said, the special election, the early voting would be in April, and then Election Day would be May 4th. So that is just a very brief summary, and I know the mayor wants to get up and say a few things again to kind of conclude our presentation, and then we'd be more than happy to open it up for your questions. And again, if you do have a question, please use the mic here in the center. And the reason we're doing that is so our friends who are joining us on Zoom can hear your question also, as well as the answer. And then after we take questions from the floor, Then we'll open up the question and answer to our audience who is joining us virtually. And then after that, we'll conclude this part of the meeting, but of course, and we'll conclude the Zoom portion, but then we'll stay as long as necessary. The council is here. We've got our department heads here who have been very instrumental in developing the numbers and the concept behind each of these proposals, and we'll be stationed at each of these easels all around the perimeter of the room to answer questions in detail about each of the projects. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Hey, quick photo op, just want to see. Smile. All right. I just want to take a quick second to recognize many of the folks that are here tonight. We have Stacy Henderson, who's our city secretary. You don't have to stand, but just wave your hand. Of course, Jeff Brady, you heard from. We have Ben Williamson in the back of the room, our city manager. Jawaria Tareen, who is our deputy city manager, is here someplace. Okay. Chief McCoy is here. We have Ryan Sarter, Director of Public Works, Allison Cook, Director of Economic Development, Tammy Zimmerman, Director of Finance, Shane Davis, Director of, not Director, Environmental Services. We just know you as that. We have some folks from code enforcement that are here this evening. So if you have code questions, raise your hand. Okay. Let's see. Aaron and Lily are back here. Lily's in planning. Danielle Summers is building and code official. I'm thinking too fast or whatnot. So we have a lot of folks here that are ready to answer your questions, and they will be throughout the room in addition to our council members. So just wanted to make sure that they were pointed out. If I missed somebody, please forgive me. So again, I myself can't be more transparent in saying that any proposed bond is a tax increase. I don't think those words have ever been said before, but that is the reality. Now, we have debt rolling off. The proposal that you see in front of you is to replace that debt with other projects, again, creating a net zero tax rate increase situation for residents. That's real important to remember. In putting this together, the council, myself, we wanted to be as transparent as possible with folks. That's why we're having this meeting. That's why there will be additional follow-up town halls in case people weren't able to come here this evening and they still want to come and ask questions in person. You'll have that opportunity, but we want to be as thorough as possible in answering questions. We believe that these issues and these items are important projects for you to consider. They're important for our city. But at the end of the day, it's your decision. Again, they do align with our critical business outcomes that have been a process, gosh, since I first got on council, and we started thinking in that direction and just moving through the years. Some of them may change, some may get added to or fine-tuned, but it's important that we have goals. And in establishing those goals, we need to have a way to execute, and the bond is that way or that vehicle for many of these proposed projects. It's important that we continue to have diverse housing options for residents and that we support the evolution of the arts and culture and recreation in our city and maintain high-quality public assets. So Having said all that, if we add this bond to the May ballot, it'll be up to you to approve each project individually. And that's been a question I've been continually receiving. Is it one, or is it all, or none? No. Each one is its own item. So that's very important. And again, if all 5 are approved, you're not looking at a tax rate increase from the city. So at this time, if anybody has a question, I would invite you to come up to the microphone and state your name, and then we will do our best to answer your question here. And if you feel more comfortable in talking individually to folks, we'll be stationed around the room here in just a few minutes, but we'll give adequate time to answer questions here, and then for those on Zoom also.
I appreciate my name is Colleen Rulli. Colleen Rulli.
Is that on?
Colleen, let's see if we can get the audio focused. And then it's stage.
Gotta put me on
Hold
TV,
on one
right?
second. I don't know, go.
Is that on now?
Now it's on.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Colleen Rulli, lived in Farmers Ranch a very, very long time. And my question before we get started on the details of this is, what does this bond election cost the city? What if we don't have an election? How much money do we save if we don't have a bond election?
So we are already going to have an election in May because we have 2 council positions that are up in May, all right? I believe on average it's about $30,000 for us to hold an election.
Right.
The number of items is almost immaterial.
So when the attorneys are working on how these statements will be drafted, I assume there's a cost associated with that. So if we move forward with 5 items and we're doing the research on 5 items and having them do the documentation for that 5 items, there is a cost. And since it's not decided that we're going to have one, I'd like to know what that is first. Thank you.
Okay, duly noted. I don't have that information, but we'll research that. Feel free to just come on up and stand in line if you'd like.
Sharon Lucas, about the water treatment, the water lines. What percentage of redoing the whole water system are we covering with this one bond issue? I mean, it sounds like this is going to be an ongoing situation. And so are we doing 1% now or 10%? I need an explanation.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Ryan Sauter, Director of Public Works. Appreciate the question. Facts are you're looking at between 7,000 and 8,000 feet for $2 million. When you put that in perspective, we have roughly 111 miles of water main. But you also have to consider a lot of that's already PVC. We have a lot of PVC line in the system, but we still have probably 67 to 68% that needs to be replaced that's outdated. So you're looking at probably 60, 68, 69 miles left to replace, and we're going to replace about 1.5 miles of it. So not a lot.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Rebecca Jenkins, and I live over on Eric Lane in your district, Tracy. Had not intended to ask this question, but since you brought it up, is there any federal grant money that's available for infrastructure improvement? Since that's a topic that just was addressed.
There is some grant money out there. A lot of the infrastructure grants that are being provided right now are for specific demographic areas, primarily up north in the Michigan, Pennsylvania areas. They also target cities with a demographic based on income, which we don't qualify for a lot of that. There are grants out there that are match grants. We look at all of those we possibly can. We take advantage of all of them that we possibly can. But again, it's a demographic. We have a grant coordinator. She looks at all those grants on a daily basis. If we have any that we are eligible for, we try to take advantage of them, but they're still match grants. You fund the money up front, they reimburse you on the back end.
Okay.
So it's not you don't get the immediate savings. They don't just cut you a check for grants. And there's a cost associated with managing those grants too. So it's never free money.
Not free money,
No, ma'am.
but it's a little helpful sometimes, huh?
It can be sometimes, but the costs that come with it and the amount of manpower it takes to manage those grants, it's very costly. It's never free.
Interesting, interesting. Well, my question actually was, how did you come up with these bond amounts in the first place? Where were those numbers generated and how? Thank you.
So I'll give you my input, and then if anybody else wants to chime in. So the bond amounts were determined through lots of discussion with council and with staff. Their recommendations, they are the experts in running the city and in dealing with these projects on a daily basis. So in looking at things that needed to be done, it needed to be considered. And there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff we talked about that didn't make this list. But it was a general consensus of council that each one of these proposed items was important. Well, okay, now that we have a list, then what do we have money for? There could have been something on the list that cost many millions of dollars that we wouldn't have been able to fund here. I think one of the main goals was we didn't want to raise taxes. Again, keeping a budget, a tight budget on something, and trying to come up with projects that would result in no tax increase to residents, just replacing the debt that was rolling off. That was sort of the overriding concern. Now, we could shift dollars amongst the various items, but we didn't do that. We came up with 5 items and assigned specific values to them. Those are what you'll be voting on if we move forward. And the council will not be able to the city will not be able to take money from one project and move it to another. So once the projects are voted on and approved, that's it. There's no, oh, we'll just take $1 million from over here because we hadn't spent it yet and put it over here. Can't do that. Cannot do that. Council, anybody like to add to that?
Make sure. There we are. Can you hear me now? So in order to add on to what the mayor said, we went through a number of projects that we have. There's a laundry list, as you can imagine, running the city of things that need to be improved on. So therefore, we looked at the dollars that we had and determined this list of things that made the biggest impact and perhaps could make either market an improvement on things or perhaps close things, such as the dollars that are allocated here to the branch connection to finish phase 2. And then these other projects that have already been mentioned, like water, and we also had concerns about streets. Those are bigger projects, but we need to be able, like anyone running their budget, to put money away for these bigger projects. We know that they're coming. And so that was the approach that the council did. And we looked at areas such as Squire Park, an opportunity to put more money into an older park and bring other amenities to that particular park. And so that's why we tried to create a balance, if you will, for these particular dollars at this particular time. If the number, as the mayor said, had been larger, we might have had different items on the project list. But this is the numbers that we had, and that we tried to distribute them across these multiple projects. Initially, I will tell you, we had only 2 projects on the list. One was the demo rebuild, and the other was the water improvement. Those were the only 2. And so the discussion between the council was we should maybe think about expanding these opportunities. And so that's how we arrived at this particular list. So I hope that gives a little bit of the insight on how we arrived at this list.
Thank you, Councilman.
I thought her question was, how did you come up with the numbers for each project? I may be mistaken, but that's the way I understood. Were there bids? How did you evaluate what you're putting?
So we took the input from staff because we charged them to research, hey, we're interested in these projects. We've narrowed a list down. With only $8 million, there's not a whole lot that you can do. So we defer to staff to come up with the recommendation, what is an appropriate number to spend on each project. And that was, these are the numbers that came back based on that.
From staff.
Okay.
Good evening, Mike Harrison. 2 questions. Number 1, where can one find documentation on a description of each one of the bond issues that you're proposing tonight, be it on the web or on the city website or where?
So each of the proposed bond items will, this presentation will be online. The video will be online of it, and then the detailed information will be online again. As we get closer, when council calls the election, the legal language associated with each proposition will be on the line. It'll be in the newspaper and all the required ways that the state mandates that you.
Okay, very good. Number 2, could someone prioritize the criticality of each one of the bonds? Could you rate them as this bond is the top priority, and number 2, number 3, number 4 in criticality of passage?
We haven't done that, and that is why it's our recommendation that residents have the right to vote on each one of these items as they see fit, okay? And we're not here tonight to say this is most important. We're not advocating in that way. We're just providing the education.
Okay.
So you may have private discussions with your council representatives, and they may tell you their list of priorities, because within the 5, it may vary depending on the 5 or 6 of us, and that's okay. But I would encourage everybody to speak to their representative or multiple representatives and hear what they think's most important.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Hi, I'm Bill Glancy, live at 3808 Wooded Creek Drive in Farmers Branch. I'd like to talk to you a minute about the dispatch center that we have. Historically, what we did is to start that up. We felt there was a great need for this type of thing, because we had in the past, actually, when somebody was in a car police chase, the only way our cities had to convert it between cities that they're traveling through, we had to call them up on the phone and talk to them rather than through a dispatch center. And of course, a lot of people don't really know along the borders, they're inboard borders, so going through a dispatch center, it made it a lot faster for people to be able to respond. And we set that thing up. We rented this facility and put it in there. Nobody was for sure how it was going to work, but I think it is working out well and serving all 4 of our cities and be able to work together about that. But I would, and if we do this with COs, this is going to be your choice. And I have the privilege, I'm a citizen now, I don't have to be from your standpoint and look at everything from the dollar cent standpoint. But I think we ought to look at further expansion of that facility. Today with technology and surveillance cameras, we can do so much more in crime prevention. Now, we have a very low crime area here. It's probably one of the lowest in the state and all that, but we're having prosperity. And prosperity brings crime. And so I think we need to think about getting ahead of the program before it happens to us. And I think with surveillance cameras today, and the things are dirt cheap, and you can put them up, and if you buy 25, you can buy 25 or 30 dummies, and people don't know, you move them around, do all kinds of things. But we have the ability today to transfer an image to a police car that officer responding can actually see what's going on before he gets there and knows who the people are and what's happening. And, you know, I'm old enough that I was on the council 40 years ago when Officer Tribble was killed, and I still remember that event. And I don't want to see us go through and losing another officer. And, you know, when as mayor, you get divided up to the police station every once in a while when we have a hire a new policeman, swear them in, or give them a promotion. You see young families that there. And you want to protect these guys and make sure that they're able to come home at night and do all those things. And I think we should think about that in terms of this facility, and whether we do it right now or it's a time when we've got to work with the other cities. But I think there's a lot of things that can be done to solve crime. Of course, we have to watch Austin, because the defense lawyers will go down there and get the law changed so that we can't use cameras and stuff, just like they have with a lot of these other things. So we always have to stay one step ahead of that. But I think that's something that we really need to look at with this new facility. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you. Jeff, do we have anybody online? Okay. Let me just take a moment to remind any of our online viewers, if you have questions, raise your hand and type them in, and Jeff Brady will read them to us. We'll get them answered.
Speaking about that facility, I mean, Farmers Branch is contributing money. There are three other towns. Are they also contributing the
Yes.
same amount
Yes.
of money?
So,
So we're doing like 20 million
yes.
in total.
Building a facility, especially one of this nature, it's not cheap. Land has to be acquired. Of course, building the building and putting in all the infrastructure is
all
a
the
very
technology.
expensive proposition to build a call center. But
What happens if one other town doesn't approve it?
this is all or nothing. I think everybody, and I have regular meetings with my fellow mayors from the other cities. Everybody's on board.
Okay, so everybody is proposing a bond issue to pay for this?
Yes.
So if I can be a little bit more specific, so the way that the cost of the 911 center is being assessed is based off of the call volume. So a larger city is going to contribute more towards the cost of running the facility, paying their employees and all those things, as well as building a new facility. So Farmers Branch has 25% of the call volume, which is why we have 25% of the cost of a $20 million facility. And then Carrollton has about 50%, so they're going to pay $10 million. And then other cities, Addison and Coppell, I think they're like 13 and 17% call volume. So I don't know what that equates to, but everyone's paying in their fair share based off of call volume. We are choosing to move forward with debt to pay for this. I know that Carrollton had looked at just paying for it out of their own savings, as well as Coppell, and I think Addison was looking forward to doing a bond instrument like we are.
Yeah. Everybody shares the pro rata cost of running it, and it would be shared that way. So everybody's in. Will be in. Okay. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Good evening. I'm Tim Wright. I live here in Farmers Branch off and on most of my life. My grandfather was the mayor. So I have lots of questions. I'm going to just pare down a few of them. My first question is, how much more does the bond cost now than it did even 5 years ago?
Interest rates.
Yeah, what's your interest rate going to be? You're not going to get 2 or 3% anymore. You're going to get something substantially more. Is that right?
Hi, Tammy Zimmerman, Director of Finance. So we ran some assumptions based on what we can sell the bonds for. And we've updated that as the market's been changing constantly. And we're at a comfortable 4.5%.
Okay. That's all I have about the financing part. The water infrastructure, I have a clarification. You said there was about 68 miles left? Because you said it's going to get us 10 to 12,000 feet, and then you talked in miles.
7 to 8,000 feet.
Okay.
About a mile and a half.
Okay, and you are talking about how many miles? I can do the conversion, you just tell me.
You're looking at
68?
68 to 69 miles of small diameter.
300,000 feet.
Yes. Yes.
And we're gonna be able to replace 10, I belong with them.
Yes.
We're gonna be able to only replace about
10,000 feet?
7 to 8,000 feet.
So not
Okay.
even 1%.
So why are we talking about making a park prettier when we have infrastructure that's going to be, it's going to cost us a whole lot more in 5 years to do 7 or 8,000 feet than it is right now? So does it get cheaper by the mile? In other words, if I took this whole bond package at $10 million, am I going to get more than the 4 times in the number that's going out? Do we know? Do we have a bid on any of this?
I couldn't tell you. Once you get over that type of project, I couldn't tell you what type of discount, if any, you would get. All I can tell you is on average, we're running about $275 to $300 a foot, linear foot, for water line replacement right now.
Okay. And so right now, do we do that in-house?
Some of it, no, not for these large projects. It's all contracted out.
Okay.
We're not staffed to do that type of work in-house.
Do we put out bids for that?
Yes, everything's competitive bid.
Okay. So we didn't do a competitive bid to find out if we did more than this. We just did the bid for the 8,000.
We went off of our recent bid projects.
Okay, so we don't even have a current bid.
That is pretty current.
How current?
We have
6
water
months.
projects going on in the city right now. I mean,
I
this is
understand,
ongoing.
but when did that start?
Ongoing, so I think he's got a pretty good number.
I understand, but when did it start? Did it start 2 years ago? Did it start 6 months ago? Because in 2 years, I'm sorry, I know inflation isn't real, but it is. The cost of everything has gone up. So I'm just trying to get an idea, because when you start talking about feet and then you say we have miles, I know there's 5,386 feet in a mile, okay? My mother and my grandfather were in real estate. I understand all that. So I'm just trying to get an idea, because at $2 million for 8,000 feet, you're looking at a whole lot of money. And I'm looking at projects that are really nice and really pretty. And I know the last 2 times we've done bonds, we've done really nice and really pretty projects. But I know we have a water tower that's built in the 60s. I know Carrollton just replaced theirs. How much does that cost? I know that we have all these other infrastructure projects that need to be done in streets and roads, as well as in the water. So why are we prioritizing things that aren't going to be really beneficial for our city in 3 to 5 years? Because otherwise, we're going to have a crumbling infrastructure and we're going to look like Detroit.
I think one thing that I'll say to that is, you know, I remember when I got really involved as a resident, and I had very similar thoughts, but sitting in these shoes and making the decisions that we have to make, our responsibility is to ensure that we can improve people's quality of life, and different people have different needs. So what we're trying to do is find projects that have an appeal to more than just one type of person. And we don't know if all of these bonds are going to be successful, but we wanted to give the power to the taxpayers to vote on them. That's why they're all separate. They're not one package deals. And if you don't agree with some of the items, then feel free to vote against them. But there will be some people that will vote for them, and at the end of the day, the Farmers Branch residents are going to be the ones to decide what are the items that are most important to them. We, as council members, just try to gather the feedback. And when I ran for office, I knocked on almost every single door in my district twice. And not once did water issues come up, but it is an important issue that we wanted to make sure was addressed. And some of the other issues that were brought to my attention are the ones that you see there. So we're just trying to find opportunities to fit the needs of as many number of people here in the city.
Yeah. So if
I
I
understand what
may,
you're saying.
if I may, let me add into this. Ryan Sauter, the Director of Public Works, provided the council previously an overview of the overall project. And that overall project, you're right, we're talking about miles and miles of infrastructure.
Texas, yeah.
So if we tell you that that proposal that he gave to us was $200 million to finish that entire project. Now, if we came to you, and let's just hypothetically, if we came to you and said we wanted to have a bond election for $200 million, that's not going to fly very well. But we, in managing the city, and this is where we put our city manager, Ben Williamson, on the task, is that we need to look at how can we take bite-sized chunks of that $200 million. Is the expectation that we do all 68 miles this year? The answer is no. So therefore, you have to figure out, is it a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 40-year plan? What is the right level? And therefore, if you take that and chunk that down, if you will, then it allows us to put an amount of $2 million that puts us in the right direction for this. We recognize that this project, which will be $200 million in today's dollars, and tomorrow's dollars will be plus something. We all understand that. And so therefore, this is how we're approaching it at this particular time, with this amount of dollars that are available to us to spread accordingly. So I hope that gets you. We're not being
everything you guys have said, right? I'm not saying
we're not being
we need to
we're
do it
not
all at
losing the sight on the overall project, and that is $200 million.
Right.
We're going to have to figure out how to pay for that over the next 30, 40 years. And that's only for water.
So will
And
it
then
last
my
30
dear
years is
friend
my
that I met
question.
here this evening is also interested, and I know many others are, about streets. And
Yes.
guess what? At $4 to $5 to $6 million a mile, there are 404 miles at the moment, and we're building more streets in our city to take care of. So this is an inevitability that we have to address, and so we're taking it at bite-sized chunks. And so this is one small step of dollars rolling off with this bond that we can bring forward and start to move forward.
So I
Hopefully
agree
that
with,
helps.
with everything you've said. I understand. But how many people even know we need water infrastructure upkeep, right? And Ryan, by the way, I'm not picking on you. You did a fantastic job. I'm just trying to figure this whole thing out, because you're talking about a 40-year project. My question is, do you have 40 years? Because a lot of this infrastructure is 60 or 70 years old. Do you have another 40 years? What is the real time frame that we need to do? Because it's all nice that we want to do things for everybody in the city, but most people in the city would like for somebody to say, hey guys, we have to replace this in the next 10 years or in the next 20 years, and let's figure out how to do it, instead of you guys picking it and saying, well, you know, we have these nice projects and we're going to pick 3 of these and we're going to kind of short this one a little bit just because, you know, we don't want to do the hard decisions. It's time for some hard decisions. The whole country has to do it. So
You are-
that's what I'm going to leave you with.
And let me just say, you're absolutely right. It's time for hard decisions, okay? But the $2 million in this bond is in addition to other money that's been spent, been appropriated, whatnot. We're not just saying, oh, we've got $2 million, let's go at it. This has been an ongoing project. And you're also right in how many people know what's going on or know about water infrastructure.
Exactly.
I would stand here and say 99% of the people in Farmers Branch don't know. They don't care about. Now, they might as soon as something
brown
happens.
stuff comes out of their pipes, they will
But
be.
that is our job as your elected representative, to be all over that. You know, as a council person, I've had to learn about so many different things. Floodwater, water lines, sewer lines, parks, tree maintenance. How much does a fire truck cost? The last one we bought was $2.3 million. Okay. Police cars at probably over $100,000 a pop once they're fully outfitted. There are a lot of things that we have to deal with. And for us to sit here, our Public Works Director has identified an issue.
Yeah.
And he said,
And thank you. for
they
that.
have developed a long-term plan for biting off $200 million worth of potential work into bite-sized pieces that can be attacked every year. Not all of it has to be done at once.
Right.
The oldest infrastructure, which started under Mark Bentley, I believe, and the most vulnerable, has been addressed or is in the process of being addressed. And I think that's really important to
Correct.
recognize that not only you should sleep well at night because you've got a very good staff that has been able to identify and manage what is going on, what's the most critical need, and you've got council that has been educated to make the right decisions to help them get to where they need to be.
Again.
Fair enough?
I think it's important that we as a community understand these underlying issues, and we don't have to be, I'm sorry, I travel a lot, so I'm not usually here on a Tuesday, right? I happened to be here, so I was glad I was, because in Minnesota it's a lot colder. But I know that, like I said, been around for a long time. I know that this city has a lot of aging infrastructure, and nobody talks about it, so nobody knows about it. 99% of the residents don't care about it, but I bet if you told people the water infrastructure, the gas infrastructure, well, Atmos takes care of that, but you know, it's X amount of years old, and we need to do X amount a year, and we have this shortfall, or we need to do this. How do we do this as a community? You get a whole lot of more ideas than just saying, well, I'm going to build 8,000 feet with $2 million.
Well, and again, some of this is included in normal operations.
Correct.
So that's part of city budget. So don't think that, oh, we're just looking at this 7,000 or 8,000 feet. No, this gives us additional runway to add on to what is already being done as normal operations, okay?
Right.
But in terms of knowing what's going on, you know, information about this is communicated in the branch review, which comes with the water bill.
I do read it.
It's online, okay? Your council members, call your council members when you have questions. That's what they're here for, to serve you and answer your questions,
Okay. I'm gonna
okay?
give up the floor.
So,
Or do you want?
and I'm glad you got to come tonight.
Thank you.
All right.
I
Yeah,
guess
and
my wife has a question.
I have a question or two as well. So, David, you had brought out, which I appreciate, that if we do have to bite size, because if you think about the city as you would think about your home, you have to budget. I mean, if I know something's going to go out in 5 or, you know, I've got to be pocketing and saving some money for that. Do we have an idea of how long the water system is going to be okay? Do we have, I mean, do we have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 40-year plan? Because I know we were talking about this on the way over here, because as Tim had mentioned, we keep yo-yoing back to Farmers Branch. He grew up here. Granddaddy was mayor. And Carrollton just put up their water tower, which has brought conversation into our home, like, what about the Farmers Branch water tower? And his mother has confirmed that that water tower went up when Granddaddy was mayor 60-plus years ago. I mean, how long does a water tower last? That sounds like a long time it's been alive.
Okay, we do have a large system. We do keep a running list of projects for this system. We do maintenance and repair on the system. We identify trouble locations based on the maintenance and repair requirements. So those are the ones that we hit because they show the most criticality. We have a CIP budget that we operate for maintenance and repair every year. Capital Improvement Program. Water mains were designed to last 50 years. Cast iron, ductile iron, and asbestos cement and reinforced concrete pipes. All of them nationwide have outlived their life expectancy.
What's our average age here?
We have, I believe our oldest lines are around 1955. And those are large diameter mains. Those particular lines were designed on a 75-year criteria back then. They have exceeded their lifespan as well. PVC, when it was first designed, was designed on a 75-year lifespan as well. The new HDPE PVCs are designed on a 100-year assumption, but they also have a baseline of 75 years just like everything else. As you can imagine, that's how these companies ensure that they continue to get money. So it's going to be an ongoing project. You're never going to catch up. It doesn't matter what part of the country you live in, you're never going to catch up. But we do maintain a projects list based on critical loads. These are the areas that we need to focus on. They're giving us the most problems. We need to get rid of them first. And that's how we operate on the water and sewer side. So as you can imagine, water and sewer, you basically have twice as much. So it's a large project, it's a large undertaking. Water towers can last a long time. We do maintenance and repair, scheduled inspections annually. We do annual cleaning. We do annual cathodic protection inspections. So our water towers, if our water tower reaches a level where it needs to be rehabbed, we're going to know it way ahead of time. But we do maintenance and inspection, painting, and protection on those annually.
Okay.
So it's not, we're not letting them go. They're inspected annually. We televise them annually. We know what's going on with the water towers long before we have imminent failure. That's why we painted the one on the west side back in 2014 or 15, because it was time.
Okay.
So we track all of that.
One other question, if I may.
Sure.
So I appreciate the fact that we have the opportunity to vote on each proposition. Let's say not all 5 pass. 1 or 2 are all we get to pass, the rest don't pass. Is there then an opportunity to come back for a vote to reallocate money to say, well, we need more money toward water, or we need more money toward, parks or whatever passes?
I'll defer to my super friend, the Director of Finance.
Oh, yay, somebody new.
Tammy Zimmerman, Director of Finance. So we do have on each of the proposition bulletin boards behind me and in the back, where we're saying what the offset is if it isn't approved. We don't have the opportunity with this bond election to go then and reallocate. We can go in a future council approval on another election and do something different. But these propositions are as is.
Okay. So fixed money.
Correct.
And Tammy, can you also explain if one doesn't pass, I believe there's a time period from which we can raise another bond election, right?
So if one were not to pass, it takes 3 years before we can bring it before the general public for a vote again. Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Paige First. Lived here nearly 12 years. And I wanted to just speak as a realtor in the room and a resident with grandchildren who are here a lot. I've heard a lot of questions just as we were walking around about the park and the, wider pathways and all that stuff. I just want to speak for all the moms and dads who aren't here because they're home with their children. We want more of them. We don't just want them as renters. We don't just want flipped houses that corporations buy in our neighborhoods. We want families to move here and have ownership in their homes. And I feel like, as I've kind of listened and then, learned a little bit more about these projects, that this puts a finger on kind of everything that serves our primary demographic that we need to. I'm so glad money's going to this building. It's so used. And so much of our demographic is over 60. This is important. And we want more young families here who own their homes, live in their homes, and want to raise their families here in our schools. And I just kind of am making my case for the ones that will do something to continue to attract families. As a realtor, I'm speaking for my clients and people they hear from. Farmers Branch is being talked about. And it's being talked about because we're the city with the parks. That's what gets people's attention. And when they drive to those places, the appeal of it, and we don't think about wider sidewalks and a fresh take on things and some of these tear down rebuilds. But they speak really strongly to buyers who want to invest in a community that are going to see a return on their investment in 20 years and want to stay where they are. So I like how the money's been spread out. I know, we could dedicate every penny to water. I mean, none of us want to replace our cast iron and spend $30,000 or fix our foundation and put on a new roof. That's not prettier. That doesn't, it's not a new outside. It's not new landscape. It's not new furniture, but it has to be done. And so I like how it's been divided. I feel like it touches every place that needed to be touched. And if we could do $100 million, we would all have something on our wish list, which mine has to do with my particular neighborhood. That we've got some real needs that we'd like some city help with that you guys are aware of at Oak Brook, but you have to prioritize and you've got to spread the wealth. If it's a little bucket, and we've got to spread it out and touch as many pots as we can. So that's it.
Thank you so much for your comment. I believe Jeff has one question that's come in so far.
Check. Is this on? Just check this mic. Thanks, Mayor. We do have some, we have had up to 14 people, so have been participating via Zoom with the meeting. And we have a question here from Nancy Muniz. And here's what she says. Has the city released a map of the streets intended to be repaired? If not, would this be provided to the residents prior to the election? And how are the streets being evaluated to determine what streets need more repair than others? So I have responded to her to make sure she understands there aren't really any street projects in any of these bond proposals, but maybe she's referring to trails and sidewalks.
That's possible, but Ryan, do you want to, or Shane?
Shane Davis, Deputy Director of Public Works. In terms of the trails, if that's what she's asking about, we have a trail master plan that is online. One of the things we would prioritize with this money is really the connections are a big deal. We have quite a bit of sidewalk. There's probably some missing pieces out there, so we'd focus on making connections where one block has sidewalk, but the next one may not. For me, a big challenge is we have this lovely Rawhide Greenbelt. Hopefully a lot of y'all walk on that. I challenge all y'all to take the north side of that Greenbelt and try and get across Josie. To me, how do we make a good connection across there? I don't want you to have to walk all the way down to the south side and then cross and go back up to the north side. So looking at things like that, how do we make it good for pedestrians to get across things like that so you can fully use our amenities? Other things I would focus on. Someone asked about trail-related projects. Those are, to me, the connections are something we really haven't focused on too much yet. We put in our first Z crossing. For those y'all have been to other cities, you may have seen those before. We have one on Valley View. So how do I connect these different amenities to get you to the places you want to go? Some of the things I hear people are challenged with is I don't feel safe trying to cross this particular street. Well, what can we do? To me, that's all related to trails and sidewalks. So for me, connections would be huge to focus on with the money, along with just the infrastructure, the concrete you see. So for me, those are the priorities. I'll be back here at the end of the day, so if you have other things you want to tell me that this is a bigger priority to you, come talk to me, please.
Can I just mention one thing? On regards to Omar's question, on if something was denied on the bond election, it's 3 years in issuing certificates of obligation is what we're prohibited. You can go back and do another general bond election, and if it gets passed, then that can go forward. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Tammy.
As a follow-up, by the way, on the water tower, y'all are just real fortunate. My
can
mother
you-
wanted to put a restaurant on
Can you-
top,
can you
and
say-
they didn't do it.
Can you state your name? Can you state your name?
Can I do what?
Say your name.
What's your name?
Oh, Gail Aroldi. Anyway, I have a question. I'm looking around this audience, and I'm trying to figure out why we're doing more building out of parks, because I don't see many people here that would be using them. My kids, my grandkids, and my great-grandkids, whenever, we have no problem finding a wonderful park to play in and to do what we need to do. And yet, this Christmas, I took my great-grandson to what I thought was going to be a great experience down at the historical park and that area all around there. It's gone. We don't have the money to support the parks we have, but we have to build more. It doesn't make sense. We need to support. That was part of Farmers Branch, was to have Christmas, and it made big Christmas, and yet we're going to go build more parks and not take care of the ones we have. It does not make sense to me. I don't see many people here that'll use whatever millions we spend on more parks. And the kids have plenty of places to play. He was talking about the infrastructure, looking ahead on what's coming up and what we're going to need in the way of infrastructure for protection and for the utilities and things like that. That's what we need to be focused on. We have a clean, safe, wonderful, well-located city. And they're not coming here because we're spending millions more on parks. And yet we couldn't even light what we used to be a Christmas pleasure. We couldn't afford that, but we can afford to go build more parks. It does not compute with me.
Yes, sir.
My name's Victor Lauerman. 2 questions, I guess. What was the duration of the initial bond that you're talking about, this replacing, this other debt that's retiring? What was the length, the timeline on that bond, and what's the length or timeline of this new bond? When does it pay off?
It's a good question. So we have a 15-year maturity. This is when these will sunset as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions over here? Okay. So are you coming forward?
Look like it? Yes, there are several things I wanted to, Vicki Harrison. There are several things I wanted to address. The first thing is that in terms of the parks, some of you weren't working for the city or on council when the COVID money, which was substantial, that the federal government gave us for infrastructure, was used to build a park. That money could have gone a long way toward working on this situation with the water. So I think that's part of the reason why people have questions for your choices, is that resoundingly, citizens did not approve of that. That's not what they wanted. So I think it's part of the reason why people are questioning that you're going to put more money into parks. And the fact of the matter is that the city historically, in my opinion, hasn't been very transparent about what the needs are. So tonight, it's very disappointing to me that you didn't have specific information about all of these bond issues. How can you expect people to ask intelligent questions and dialogue when this has been just oh, this is what we're going to do? The devil is in the details. So I don't think that there has been as much information that should have been provided if this was your kickoff for the bond election. So there's no literature, there's nothing. And not everyone, actually, I think you forget in the city, not everyone has so much access to social media and the internet. They just don't. There's a wide socioeconomic group of people. The second thing that I had is that I feel like there wasn't really an opportunity for the citizens to talk about what they, before you ever came up with this, what they might think was important in terms of improving the city or the bonds. They weren't part of that discussion. And the survey that the city manager has started using, first of all, it's so lengthy. Secondly, I consider it personally invasive, some of the questions. I know you don't have to answer all of them, but there could have been some sort of outreach to the citizens for what they would like to see. And furthermore, as regards the water, if citizens knew the issue thoroughly, their opinions might be different. So there's not, again, like using the COVID money. They didn't know that was what was happening. So I think I would plead for you to have transparency. Several times, Mayor, you alluded to calling your council person. I would like for the city to rescind the rule that was apparently, I don't know, it's not in the charter, that you can't talk to a city council person outside your district without them calling that your city council person. I don't understand that. The Farmers Branch used to be a place where you could talk to any council person. They could choose to engage or not, but it used to be more open. And I feel like that it's productive for you to be able to talk to various people. So you're saying call a councilman. You can only call one council person. And so I don't understand that rule. I don't know why that, then maybe this isn't the time to answer that, but I believe you ought to be able to freely speak to anyone. And so like if I was going to say, I want to talk to you about this, it's ridiculous, it's ludicrous that he would say, well, I'll talk to you about it, but I've got to call your council person and let you know that we talked about it. I think that on a million levels, I think that's a terrible idea. So I think it would be really helpful if you gave more details on all of these bond issues, and it would have been nice if that was available tonight, and it's not.
Okay, I don't know if you were here at the very beginning of the meeting, and is that the end of your question?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just speak in general terms. I don't know if you were here at the very beginning of the meeting when I stated that we're going to break out and we have stations that are relative to each of the individual bond proposals where anybody can get more detailed information. That is available. That will be taking place here in just a moment, and we will stay there. We will have council and staff at each of these displays to answer more specific questions. Okay, again.
Excuse me, that's not what I'm asking, Mayor. What I'm saying is, I would like to have had documents.
I understand that.
That you could take notes on and we could refer to. And this system that the city has developed, where you have, at most town halls or anything else, you have this little thing and you have that little thing, but it would be nice to have hard copies.
Okay.
And so we don't have that.
Well, no, you don't have that.
I'm just saying I would
Okay.
prefer that.
Thank you for the
It's not a huge
observation. We don't have that tonight, but moving forward, perhaps we will. Tonight was more a free-form discussion than anything else. And so, Vicki, I want to be real clear. You know, you say the city hasn't been transparent or not transparent enough, and I don't.
I'm not talking about this particular moment in time, but over a period, the city has not been, right now, there's
can't-
not a lot of information about what some of the needs of the city are, and that might color people's opinion. It's not an accusation that you particularly wasn't, and maybe it's not transparent. I don't know, some people might not choose that word. But you can't ask people to make an informed decision when you don't give them all the information. And so I think that's what the other gentleman was also saying. You know, people really knew what you needed to do. The citizens aren't stupid. I think they have an ability to evaluate and look at issues, and then they can make a more informed and intelligent response. It's just it's not an accusation toward you or any of the people here.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's not personal, all right?
Thank you. Okay, but I am going to say, I think I can't speak for what councils did in the past. I wasn't the mayor in the past, but this has been a priority of mine to make sure that your voice is heard, that when things come up, we have the opportunity to explain them, such as this meeting tonight. We're going to have more. There will be at least 3 additional town hall meetings in the coming months. And so it's important that we get information out. I'm sorry we didn't have a handout to give people tonight. And we will certainly note that moving forward. Very constructive criticism. But we had a series of of bond meetings that the public was invited to. I can't remember how many of those that we had.
And how were they advertised?
So they were part of the city council agenda, okay? And
And you're talking about social media?
I'm not talking about social media. I'm talking about, they were put on the front door of City Hall. Some members communicated information in their own personal newsletters, whatever.
Mayor, if I may, I think one of the comments was regarding being able to elicit feedback from residents about the projects that we should be focusing on in the city. And I think it's important to note, and I think you mentioned it during your presentation, that part of that process of gathering feedback involves the comprehensive plan, which many of you may remember if you went to those. It was a little bit more than a 1.5-year process where we had town halls divided up throughout the entire city. We had one on the west side, the east side, in the middle of the city. We had walking tours in different areas of the city to elicit feedback. We had surveys. There was a significant amount of input that was gathered that then created what is called the comprehensive plan. We even created a committee that helped kind of continue to gather and ensure that at the end, the document that is now called the comprehensive plan reflects what the city council and the rest of the residents of the Farmers Branch would like. And so I think that was an important piece that at least helped me. I'll tell you what I did to kind of help and steer me into whether these are items that I'd like to see on a bond election. I just pulled up the comprehensive plan. I pulled up my notebook, which I had a book when I went door to door and talked to people and took notes. And that's kind of how I developed the items that I wanted to support. And some of them are on here, not all of them always make on there, but we advocate the best that we can for as many residents as we can. So I just want to make sure we point that out, because we actually spent quite a bit of money and hired a professional company to administer this process that almost lasted 2 years. And we got a lot of feedback, and even from underrepresented individuals who don't have access to internet or don't speak English. So it was a very thorough process.
Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, I was trying to work back to get to that. So there was a lot of communication, and there was time for resident input. And then to the last point about calling a councilman, yeah, I believe it's real important. You should call your councilman. You should call all the council people. There's nothing that says that you cannot speak to a council representative who is other than your district. You can talk to any and all of them. Now, what has been requested is a courtesy that before councilman in District X responds to a resident from District Y, that District X representative get in touch with his fellow councilman. Okay, if that makes sense. So anybody can talk to the mayor. Anybody should be able to talk to any council person. Okay? And we were elected to serve the whole city, not just our area. We're city council people. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Kyle Burton. Earlier you mentioned that originally this bond had two parts. It had the water, the infrastructure improvements, and it also had the demo rebuild. I noticed that the demo rebuild is only about $500,000, and I would say it's debatable at best whether parks actually bring people to the city. I'm part of a young family. I've got 2 kids. I use parks. That didn't bring me to the city. But what would bring me to the city, and I don't think is debatable, is that demo rebuild program has revitalized this area. Is $500,000 enough? How much did we reduce it from what it originally was? And is that a smart thing?
So I'll say from my point of view, I would love to have more money in that program. We had a bond a number of years ago that pumped about $4.5 million into that program. And Allison might be able to speak better to that because she probably remembers more of it than I do. But looking forward beyond this election and this next tax year, it is something that is on my mind to try to bring forward, because that program has paid huge dividends to our city. And when you look at all the new homes that are coming and who's coming with them, new, younger families with kids, that's huge.
But if you look at it, I mean, we've got $500,000 for that. We've got $2 million spread around for parks and for this building. The building looks great. I mean.
This is one of the few buildings, I think it's the last building that has not been touched since it was built. So it has not seen any renovation or improvement.
The police station.
Well, we've been doing work on the police station, but other than this floor in here, that's about it for this building.
So are you saying that even if they approve the $500,000 for the demo rebuild, that's not, that they could go back and put more in it at a later date, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So city manager and I have had discussion, hadn't gone to council yet, but in looking forward into next year's budget, if we have additional money, that's something that we might consider taking money from the budget and putting into demo rebuild. But I'm of the personal belief that we will still need a bond to get us to where we need to be in that fund, so we can continue it and continue the improvements and the work that's been done.
And my original question was, how much was that reduced from what it originally was? Was it all the $13 million was
It's the
spread-
same amount.
It was only going to be 500?
Yeah, for the demo rebuild program, it was only 500 to begin with.
And is that enough? How much do we typically, I mean, how?
Well, the last bond was $4.5 million.
There you go.
The 2017 bond, I'm Allison Cook, Director of Economic Development. The 2017 bond was $4 million. 2 went toward demo rebuild, and 2 went toward Neighborhood Renaissance Program, where the city buys dilapidated homes and has vacant lots with new builds. So the demo rebuild program is where you own your own lot, you own an older home, and you get an incentive if you want to build a new one.
Right.
So the original, the one from just a few months ago, I think we were talking about roughly maybe 50% or a little bit less of this bond proceeds, but we serve at council direction. I did not ask this gentleman to come, but I absolutely need more money. So if you want to agree with me now, raise your hand, but I will take more money from any other department, no shame. We can use more money.
Thank you. Okay.
So
Parks first. Take it from Parks.
So this is the last question we're going to take here, and then I want to break out because we've been in this format for about an hour or so. Then we'll break out, and we can, you all will be able to ask questions about the individual items. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Ann Abadi Orton. Something that was just, an answer that was just given really puzzles me. Someone said that this bond is for 15 years. If it's going to take 20 or 40 years to finish the water system, does that mean we only get to build 1 mile of water system in the next 15 years? But, I mean, probably not, but that's the way it came across.
So the debt has an amortization schedule of 15 years. It's not that we're going to use the money slowly over those 15 years and spread it out. We're going to use it as soon as the proceeds are sold.
Exactly, but when are we going to get more money for more water? We got to have to wait another 15 years to get enough money to repair another mile?
So that is part of our budget process on a yearly basis. We have our capital improvement project budgets that we go and we add money to each year for what Ryan has already spoke about, and the maintenance and building of our
Thank you.
infrastructure.
Like I said, it just struck me the way it was presented. It sounded like, you know, we get 1.5 miles for 15 years. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just take a quick second to remind those that are Zooming in that we're going to end the Zoom portion of our meeting. However, this full presentation tonight will be posted on the city's YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find it there to go back and re-watch. We're going to break out and have folks and staff, council members and staff at each of these poster board stations. So if you have questions, we can talk about that on a more individual basis. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, number one. I really, really appreciate it. 2, if you didn't get a snack, please have a snack, and so we don't have to take that home. And council members, thank you. Staff, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, residents. Again, be on the lookout. We will be communicating our future meetings and welcome you all to come to those also.